Right, it's the international break, which means one thing and one thing only. There's literally nothing to talk about, is there? Because no one cares about England playing Malta. Wake us up when it's tournament time. So this Sunday morning, I thought I would bring you lot my all-time Chelsea 11. People, what's happening? Welcome back to the Joey Knight podcast. If you're new around here, at the end of the video, if you like the content and you want to see more from myself, please hit the subscribe button. And also, if you feel like it, click the bell, because then you get notifications every time I drop a video. Also, I've been asking you lot to do it. Please smash the like button as well. Let's get into it. Okay, first let me lay down a few ground rules. I am not going to go with the old Sven-Göran Eriksson England Golden Generation tactics, which means I'll only be picking players in the positions I think they're suited to. Also, I'm only going to be picking players from my lifetime, and obviously I was born in 1994. When I was 2 in 1996, I wasn't watching all that much Chelsea, funnily enough, so there's a lot of players that, were sort of in the time that I've been alive that won't be picked in it. I am going to pick players from my conscious time supporting Chelsea, which probably comes from the early 2000s. Now brace yourself, because some of your favourites will be left out of this team. We have had a ridiculous amount of ridiculously talented players over the years, and for that reason I can't fit them all in to a starting 11. So this might make a few people angry, but all that being said, I'm going to try my best here. I am going to go with a 4-3-3 formation. And in goal, it can only be one man. It's got to be Peter Cech. 202 clean sheets in 443 Premier League appearances. That is ridiculous. He got better once he had the helmet on, and Peter Cech was probably, for me, I know everyone will give the credit to Drogba, maybe so Lampard, but for me, Drogba's not in a position to score that Champions League winning penalty had it not been for Peter Cech. Peter Cech pulled off a masterclass in the final, and for so many years, Peter Cech was ridiculously good. There's a notion that goes round sometimes that says, Peter Cech was only so good because he had John Terry and the defenders in front of him. He did, and of course, that would have added to his game. But mate, you could have stuck Peter Cech at Portsmouth, at Southampton, at Burnley, at any club, and I think he would have been just as good. The man was phenomenal. Now let's move on to the back line. Right back, you know who I'm going with, and it's going to upset a few people because this is all time, but for me, it is Reece James. We could have had Ivanovic here. We could have had Azpilicueta here. But when you see my lineup, I think stylistically suited to how I would want this team to play, it's got to be Reece James. And let's be honest, he's had injuries and he's had awful luck with it. But on his day, Reece James is the best in the world in that position for me. So I'm having Reece James there. Next to him, I'm going with Carvalho. Now, obviously, Carvalho, we could have had a few defenders in here. You'll all know that next to Carvalho, I'm going with John Terry. That is obvious. The club captain, the man that carried us through all of those successful years, being a massive, massive leader in that team. He's always going to be in there. But let's speak about Carvalho, because we could have had other options here. We could have gone with Thiago Silva, Marcel Desailly, Gary Cahill, but I genuinely just look at Carvalho and I think what he did in that season, the first season under Jose, 24 clean sheets in the league. And obviously it was his partnership with John Terry that did this. But to have 24 clean sheets in the league is ridiculous. 15 goals conceded. That's mental. That is absolutely crazy. We look at last season. Man City won the league. 33 goals conceded. They conceded over twice the amount of goals that partnership between John Terry and Ricardo Carvalho did. And let's all remember here as well, in that league-winning season, we didn't even have Ashley Cole either, So that defence was crazy. And for that reason, I've got to pair John Terry with Carvalho there. So, yeah, going on to the left-back slot, you know who it's going to be. Ashley Cole. Ashley Cole was ridiculously good for Chelsea. He was hated by Arsenal, hated by Tottenham, but loved by Chelsea fans for coming over. Let's be honest, taking the money, but who cares? He came in, club legend for me, in my opinion, and I would genuinely say that there's not often a time sort of in my lifetime that you can look at any English player and go, definitively, you were the absolute best in the world. We look at, obviously, when Wayne Rooney was on fire. Yeah, he was brilliant, but, forwards for other countries, you had Ronaldo and Messi about at that time, You had Lewandowski banging in goals at that time. Plenty more names that aren't coming to my head right at this moment in time. Lampard, brilliant, absolute, one of the best ever to do it in the Premier League, as was Gerrard. But also, you had Xavi, you had Iniesta, you had so many other midfielders. Ashley Cole, when he was active, mate, for me, he was better than Roberto Carlos. I think defensively, you got to, back then as well, when fullbacks weren't maybe bombing on so much, you got to look at defensively what they could do. And Ashley Cole was the greatest. I'd say he's probably, for me, the greatest left back of all time. But, obviously my lifetime I'm going on about here. Anyway, let's go on to the midfield three. Let me start off by naming the man who is obviously going to always be in this midfield three. Is Super Frankie Lampard. Chelsea's leading goal scorer, 211 goals, and I very much doubt anyone's ever going to surpass him, to be honest. I mean, given time, all records are there to be broken, but Frank Lampard, ridiculous. And ridiculous the fact that we're talking about it not coming from a striker, coming from a midfielder. Yeah, he would push on and whatnot, but back in them days, it wasn't like your centre attacking midfielder, second striker. Lampard was playing in the middle. You look at his heat maps in a lot of the games, he's playing in the middle, and he was so reliable to just be scoring goals left, right, and centre. His stats are crazy. His goals are crazy. You look at some of the goals that he scored, and it's just absolutely ridiculous. If I had to pinpoint my favourite goal from Frank Lampard that I was at the match live, FA Cup final. Who did we even play? We play Everton in that final. You lot will tell me. Can't remember. Anyway, the two other players, and this is where I'll definitely upset, some people. I'm going to have one sitting, okay? I'm going to have Lampard to the right of him and the other player on the left-hand side. My player sitting is Claude Makelele. The man was class. He had a role named after him. That's how good Claude Makelele was. And Claude Makelele paved the way for other players to then come through. Listen, Chelsea spend crazy money. I understand that. But, players like Caicedo being worth 100 million, Lavia being worth the price that he was. Obviously, in times gone by, we look at how important that position on the pitch has come to become, I should say, to title winning sides. That for me all came from Claude Makelele. So I think that he was the one that made the defensive midfield position what it is today. And a lot of people will say, well, yeah, Claude Makelele did it, but Kante maybe did it better, Essien maybe did it better. And I understand there's probably an argument there, but for me, it's got to be Makelele. And if you were hoping for Kante there, you may not be disappointed here, because I would go on the other side, the box-to-box midfielder, N'Golo Kante. Now, N'Golo Kante was obviously often compared to Claude Makelele, but for me, someone that sat in the stands and watched the two of them, N'Golo Kante was so much more than a sitting midfielder. He was a box-to-box midfielder, and that is why I've put him there. N'Golo Kante would pick up the ball and drive with it, and that wasn't something that Makelele would always do. Makelele would cut the ball out and pass it on to the more creative players, whereas N'Golo Kante could do it himself a lot of the time. And when I look at that midfield, as I say, you've got Makelele sat in the pivot, cutting things out and then passing the ball either onto N'Golo Kante, who can also cut things out and run with it, passing it onto Lampard, who will probably shoot from anywhere on the pitch and score. That midfield has got a ridiculous amount of energy, legs, composure. What a midfield. Now, I get that there's notable absentees in that midfield, the most obvious one being Michael Essien, and he's obviously very unlucky to not make the cut there, but I'm just going for my personal preference, on another day, and I could even do a second string team for this, and that would be ridiculous. Let me know in the comments if you want to see that. Essien could have got in on another day. Fabregas could have. Bakayoko, Danny Drinkwater, there's plenty of them that should have been in there, but, you can only pick so many places, so don't shoot the messenger. Forward line. This is where it gets scary. Right wing, I'm going Eden Hazard. Eden Hazard only failed twice in 7 seasons to register more than 20 goals and assists. And if you look, obviously, at his injury record, those were probably the seasons that he had injuries in. In the 18-19 season, prolific, absolutely unreal. 31 goals and assists in a single season for Chelsea. He was just so good. And look, I wish that his career, for his sake, had have done, or gone the way, I should say, that it could have gone, and it was expected to have gone when he went to Real Madrid. But there's almost something quite romantic in knowing that we were the ones that got a prime Eden Hazard. I would have him on the right wing. Through the middle, it can only be one man, Didier Drogba. 9 goals in 9 cup finals. Didier Drogba was ridiculously good. And I actually didn't name Drogba. When we did a list recently on the 5 channel, and Culture Cams was very annoyed with me for this, I didn't name Drogba in one of our best ever signings when I did top 5 signings. But the reason being, Drogba was bought in for a fair bit of money back then, around the 25 million mark. That was a fair bit. And obviously, when I was naming that list, I was trying to go for players who gave us ridiculous value for the amount of money we paid for him. But I tell you what, on reflection, Drogba should have been in there because Didier Drogba was phenomenal for Chelsea. He was the man for the big occasion. Although I gave Peter Cech credit for it earlier, along with Peter Cech, we wouldn't have won that Champions League final without Didier Drogba popping up in the 88th, 89th minute, whatever it was, with that header. Drogba, he was just, as I say, a man that when the pressure was on, Drogba's chest would puff out, he would rise to the occasion. And on the left wing, I said earlier that I wouldn't be playing players massively out of position, and I think for the most part I've stuck to that. But this man, I believe in the modern game, would have been able to play there, definitely. He could play anywhere on the pitch, but maybe he wasn't associated with being a left wing. I'm more of a centre attacking midfielder, but I have to get him in there. And that is a man that I'm privileged to have just in my time going to Stamford Bridge caught the end of his career, Gianfranco Zola. Zola was a cut above what Chelsea had had before. When we brought him into the club, I think it was 1997, we brought him in and we didn't have that sort of quality of player at our disposal. Obviously, following him, we then had a lot of players come in, you know, Di Matteo. Vialli, I think, may well have been there just before Zola. I'm not sure. Someone will be able to fact check me on that. But when we got Zola, it was like the first time that, you know, and I asked my dad about this and my older brother, but the first time really that Chelsea got someone who was genuinely world class, you know what I mean? Because you got to think as well, like 112 goal involvements in 312 games. And you may look at that and you might say, well, just off the cuff, that's not the most impressive. But you got to remember here, Zola was playing in a Chelsea side that weren't winning league titles. A lot of the time weren't competing for European spots. Zola was playing in a Chelsea side that were just sort of coming good before Abramovich. And there's a little myth here that Chelsea weren't winning anything before Abramovich. 5 trophies in 5 seasons before Abramovich came, so I'll let you know that. And I think that Zola was a massive part in us securing those trophies. So we look at that team there. The defence is elite, with not one player, in my opinion, if they're fit and available, having a single chink in their armour. And when you think about Ashley Cole, John Terry, Carvalho and Reece James, how good individually all of them are on the ball, I just don't think we're giving opposition a sniff. You're going to have to do really well to score against that defence. And obviously then you look at the midfield. I spoke about the energy and the legs that midfield have in it. You know, you've got Makelele picking out the ball, you've got Kante driving forward with it, you've got Lampard popping up with goals. And when a team start attacking and moving on, I actually see Reece James pushing out of that back line into the midfield. Makelele would obviously sit in with the defenders, and then you're looking at it and you're going, right, you've got Reece James overlapping Eden Hazard. That creates space for him. If he doesn't pass it to Eden Hazard, he's whipping balls into the box to Drogba. And if Drogba doesn't finish those balls, you know exactly who is on the edge of the area, banging in the scraps, and that is Super Frankie Lampard. Not only that, but you've got a couple of absolute magicians on either wing in Eden Hazard and Gianfranco Zola. And, you know, we look at great forward lines that we've seen during our times in football, you know. You got Salah, Firmino, Mane. You've obviously got Messi, Neymar, Suarez, Benzema, Bale, Ronaldo. But I genuinely think that Hazard, Drogba and Zola would be right up there with the very best of them. Scary prospect. We never see it, unfortunately, but my God, I'd love to. Now listen, I know I would have upset a couple of people with the absentees, and there's always going to be a hell of a lot of absentees. So for that reason, I'll tell you what we do. We'll name a 5-man bench. I'm naming a 5-man bench because otherwise it's just too easy and I'll find a way to get every single player in there. But in the modern day, we're allowed 5 subs, so I'm going to name the 5 subs that I would have. I've got to go with a goalkeeper, and the goalkeeper for me has got to be Thibaut Courtois. I loved Carlo Cudicini growing up, man. Cudicini was the bollocks, but Courtois was ridiculously good. The defender I'm going to have in there, Marcel Desailly. I know that I've obviously left out the likes of Thiago Silva. Gary Cahill was so good for Chelsea as well, you know. And there's a lot of others that maybe I'm forgetting off the top of my head that could be in there. But I would go Marcel Desailly. Again, the way I said about Zola, you know, Marcel Desailly, back end of his career, but a World Cup winner coming into that Stamford Bridge dressing room. And also would have played a very key role in John Terry's development, because that was the sort of centre-back partnership that he broke into the team with. Alongside him on the bench, Joe Cole, one of my absolute favourite players growing up. I actually had a day once, right? My dad's friend he worked at the club for something. He took me to Cobham to the training ground, and they had a press conference, and he was supposed to be going into the press conference, and he basically was told that he couldn't take me in because I was only about 11 at the time, and you can't have kids in there and whatnot. So he said, I'm going to have to leave you out here with someone. And then all of a sudden, he calls Joe Cole over, and I get to sit and eat lunch in the canteen with Joe Cole. It was wicked. And then funny enough, we interviewed Joe Cole, myself and Joel Bayer recently for the 5 channel, and that will be out hopefully at some point next week. We interviewed Joe Cole, and we're sort of talking to him and whatever, and it was surreal for me because he was an absolute idol of mine growing up. But when we've interviewed him, at the end of the interview, because we were speaking about boxing, he's a boxing fan. At the end of the interview, he said to me, he said, yeah, have you boxed on the TV then? Because he said, I really, really recognise you. And I was like, yeah, I've boxed on the TV, but I said, it might not be that. And I told him the story about how I got left with him that day at Cobham, and he remembered it, nearly 20 years later, 18 years later or something. So, ridiculous, yeah. Joe Cole's the man. Another player that I adored alongside him on the bench, Ida Goodjohnson. Probably one of the most criminally underrated players in Chelsea history, because that man was ridiculously good. The Iceman was so smooth, so elegant, just such a good player, a cut above a lot of the time on the pitch. And Ida Goodjohnson, I was lucky enough to be at a match once. Who did we play? Blackburn, I think it was. He scored a hat-trick. Very, very good player. Opening day of the season against Man United, the season when we won the league. I think it was a 1-1 draw at Stamford Bridge, but he chips it over the keeper. Oh, brilliant player. And then the last man on the bench, and he's very unlucky, you know. Drogba, what he did in big games and what he did in finals makes him surpass this man, and the longevity also. But in terms of just a one-off Premier League match, the Premier League numbers are probably better for this man. I think they are. Diego Costa. Ridiculously good. So good, Diego Costa. A handful for any defender. And there's so many other strikers we could have had in there, you know. Jimmy Floyd Hasselbank could have been in there. Matthias Kesman, great striker. Really good striker. Mikel Forsell. So, yeah, that would be my 5-man bench. Manager, for me, it's got to be Jose. 04-05 Jose was the bollocks. Jose Mourinho coming in and being able to not only win the league in his first season, acquire those sort of stats when it came to the clean sheets, when it came to just how many goals, obviously, we conceded as well, and just how good we were. Mourinho was so good. He had just won the Champions League, obviously, with Porto, Europa League the season before that. But, you know, I don't think anyone realised that he would come in and be able to be that good straight away. So Jose Mourinho would be the manager for me. People, let me know your thoughts on that team. And I really want you to do something for me, so make sure you do. Put your all-time Chelsea 11s in. Obviously, I'm going on my lifetime. I don't know how old you, the viewers, are. Most of you are between the age of 18 to 40, so they'll probably be around the same sort of timeline as mine. But I really want to hear your ones in the comments below, so stick them in the comments. I'm looking forward to reading through the comments. Have a good rest of your weekend. Hopefully, we'll have some good content to bang out in the next week or so with that Joe Cole interview. But obviously, I will be previewing the Newcastle match. That's going to be fun. Don't normally do the non-relevant stuff, so please do me a massive favour to make it worth my while and maybe potentially help me put some more of this sort of stuff out when there are sort of dry patches in content, like the video. Subscribe to the channel if you're not already, and I will see you all in the next one.